themselves to that. Do you guys feel like, at least for yourselves, if stress arises, that you know to go to something like this in the moment?
Yeah, but that doesn't mean that I'll do it.
Uh-huh.
You know, it's like I know what I know and I know what I need to do.
Uh-huh.
Right now, I'm
Uh-huh. Yeah.
I think we're creatures of habit, so we like I'm a counselor, so I definitely know what I need to do. But I think the book, The Power of Habit, if you've never have, I would highly recommend it. But that's the thing is replacing that behavior.
The habit loop.
With something. Is it the habit? It's if you were not even hungry and I really don't even have sugar cravings, but as a child, we didn't have sugar in my house, so I used it as a reward and a punishment as an adult.
Uh-huh.
And that happened in college, when I was in my 18, 19, 20, or now I'm in my 40s. So, really just recognizing our behavior and then making the choice to do what you know is healthy. But it's healthy.
Yeah. And that habit loop you're talking about, it's the same example I used before of the person who comes home from work and goes straight to the cupboard, right? And, I have them do push-ups first. That first 2, 3, 4 weeks that they're doing that, they need a lot of constant reminders of that, right? It's not just a natural habit. It's not something that they're going to walk in and just innately know to do. But after they've been doing it for a month or so, they don't even question it anymore. It's just like that's what they go do. They've created that new habit. And that can take up to 66 days to create that new habit. So it's something that requires a lot of persistence, but it's also something that pays off exponentially if you are able to put in the work, especially if you're able to kind of work with something like this with your clients, because you're a constant reminder for them, right? You're a constant check-in for them. They see you 1, 2, 3 times a week sometimes, right? And every time is an opportunity for you to remind them and help them focus, and help them really connect the dots, because that's really what we're talking about.
Hold on, just really quickly.
Please.
Okay. So one thing in that book was our willpower, and by the end of the day, our willpower is less because we make like 15,000 decisions.
It's called decision fatigue, yeah.
Right, so like I'll do great eating all day long, and then I struggle at night because I'm so exhausted mentally and emotionally from dealing with everybody else's problems. That, so that's hard too. That'd be different if it was something in the day. I'm fresh, I'm strong, and my willpower is great. But it's I can say no to pizza and Snickers and all that. It's at home, at the end of the day, that's the hard part.
Yeah. And, talking about decision fatigue, which is the concept that she's talking about here, decision fatigue is addressed easiest with breaks. And I think I was talking about breaks before, and the value of daydreaming. But breaks address decision fatigue, right? There's a lot of research on the value of breaks, from simply like a 10-minute power nap to taking a walk in the middle of the day. And frankly, anything on that get up or get done list, if you're doing that yourself in the middle of your day, it functions as a break. And what it does is it replenishes your ability to make decisions and, rectifies the impact of decision fatigue. So what that says to me right off the bat is you're not doing enough for yourself in the middle of the day. Yeah. Yep. Yep.
during your job, I mean, it shouldn't matter what you do for a living, but how many breaks would be?
There's no one size fits all, unfortunately, for that. It's really about you. Yeah. And there are different strategies dependent upon what you do, the type of work you do. For somebody who's at an office, right, sitting at a desk all day, it's a little easier to work something like that in, where you say every 52 minutes I take a 17-minute break, which is what the research numbers actually point to, that we have about a 52-minute span of focus that we can put towards one activity before our brain starts to do that and all that fog. But taking a 17-minute break then is effective at getting us back on track. If you're not at a desk all day, you can't really abide by that kind of a timer system, right? So, but here's what's interesting about that. The top 10% of productive performers function that way, where they work for 52 minutes and take 17-minute breaks. If you do the math, that means they're taking breaks for 30% of their workday. They are the top 10% in productivity. Yeah. This is office workers, people who are at a desk all day. And like I said, this is going to be very different from what most of you do, so it's not going to be easy for you to structure your day like that. But what you need to pay attention to figure out how this works for you is, when do you start to feel those effects, right? When do you start to feel the decision fatigue creeping in? When do you start to feel like, oh God, I'm not giving as much energy to this client as I did to the last one, or I'm not really as motivated, I'm not really working it. When do you feel that? And before that hits is your answer of when you need that break, right? And these breaks do not need to be long, right? You could just sit somewhere and just close your eyes and daydream or whatever it is for 5 minutes, and you get that impact, you get that refresh, right? But it's about knowing yourself and when that hits and being able to get ahead of it. So you all need, I miss you all nodding along when you were talking about that decision fatigue and her reference to being like a train, right? Means that you're not taking enough time for yourself. That's where we come back to this self-care item that was so important in our proactive stress management, right? And this is really common for people who provide services to other people for a living, is again, they put everybody else ahead of themselves, right? Talking back to the cup metaphor. How much do you have to give if you're not giving to yourself, right? Who is not getting the best end of that deal? I mean, you are leaving yourself out, but if you're not taking care of yourself all day, those last people you work with at the end of the day, they're not getting nearly as much of you as the first ones did, right? But imagine you took a break in the middle of the day, you did what you needed to do to refresh yourself, to take care of yourself, and it's like you're starting again, right? Starting fresh again after that break. So how many breaks you need, how often you need them, it's going to be very specific to you. But the first step is to pay attention to yourself and see when you see this stuff happening and how you can get ahead of it. So connecting the dots, right? A couple of people had said, well, I know what to do. Doesn't necessarily mean I do it, right? So how do we tie stress management to stress eating, right? What are the things we need to do to connect the dots and have it not just be something we know, but have it be something we do, right? Which are very, very different things. So I talk a lot about in-the-moment reminders. When you go to eat anything, if you can picture a stop sign in your head, big, giant red stop sign in front of your face, it'll give you that moment of pause. And I mean moment, because that's all we need to change our behavior, right? If we're about to go to the kitchen, we're about to go to the pantry, we're about to go to the fridge, whatever it is, and we can picture that stop sign in our head for a second, we can take that pause to think about what we're doing and think about why we're doing it. And the first thing I always tell people is ask yourself, am I hungry? Right? A good chunk of us at several points throughout the day are going to be going to get food when the answer to am I hungry is no. Right? Bless you. So if we can take the moment to ask ourselves that and then have a plan for if that happens, right? Going back to your comment, if I know what to do, I don't do it. But if your thought is, okay, if I ask myself, am I hungry, and I say no, I'm going to go do 30 seconds of push-ups, and then I'll reevaluate. Sometimes, not always, sometimes you're not going to go back, right? You're going to say, all right, I'm good. I don't need to eat. And that can go a long way to connecting the dots, but we need that first cue. And I know a lot of people that will do something like put a picture of a stop sign on their pantry door or inside their pantry door or on their fridge, something that just connects the dots in the moment for them. I have somebody who, when she opens her pantry door, she has a picture of a woman doing a squat because her rule is before I eat, I have to do 30 seconds of squats, right? And she goes to the cupboard and she sees it, and she every single time she goes, oh shit. Every single time. And then she goes and does her squats. Most of the time, she doesn't go back to the kitchen. Sometimes she does, and that's fine, right? You do your squats and you're like, you know what, actually I am hungry. I do want to go eat. You've given yourself that time to make that decision, to think about it, to change your behavior. But you know, if you're going back to eat, okay, you've done what you need to do and now it's probably okay. But if you change that behavior some of the time, you create a new habit loop, right? You create new neural synapses, new neural connections that say, this is not what I do when I'm stressed. I don't go to the kitchen, I go and do squats. That's what I do when I'm stressed, right? And I always talk about making a list. Before I was talking about, you know, this proactive and reactive stress management, and how there's no one-size-fits-all approach. The idea is that you want everybody, including yourselves, to make their own list, right? What are your personal stress management plan? What is your personal stress management plan? What are you going to do for yourself proactively to prevent stress? But in the moment when stress hits, how are you going to react to it? What is your get-up plan? What is your get-down plan? And write it out for yourself. I mean, literally, print it out, write it out. Have it somewhere so it's something you can see, right? Again, maybe it's just taped down on your kitchen counter. Maybe it's on your dining room table. Maybe it's just in your phone. But if it's something you can see or touch or feel, It has a lot more impact, and it's a lot more likely to connect the dots for you than simply living up here, right? We know all of this, right? It lives up here for almost all of us. Doesn't mean we do it. So we need that little push to connect the dots for us. And it can be any of these things, right? It can be this stop sign metaphor, this idea that I'm just, wait 1 second, literally just 1 second, let me just think. It can be the am I hungry question, which, by the way, is a great thing to ask yourself before you eat always, stress or not. And I'll talk about that tomorrow when I talk about mindful eating. But, you know, if you ask yourself, am I hungry before you eat, every time you eat, it's a great tool. Because maybe you're not eating out of stress. Maybe you're eating out of boredom. Maybe you're eating out of frustration. Maybe you're eating because food happens to be there, right? And if you ask yourself, am I hungry? It's a great way to get in touch with your hunger and build what's known as intuitive eating skills. So that can be a great tool to use all the time, regardless of whether you're a stress eater or not, or regardless of whether the situation is stressful or not. And then, like I said, keeping your list in sight can be a really valuable way to help connect the dots, especially when you're starting to create these habits, right? 66 days from now, you're a pro. You got this. This is a no-brainer. But, you know, in the beginning, when you're trying to create this new habit or this new behavioral connection, the more reminders you can have in your way, the better, right? We want to overdose on this information. We don't want to leave it inaccessible. And then, as always, you have this 30 seconds of movement option, right? Like I was talking about, doing push-ups, doing squats. Even just standing in there doing jumping jacks for 30 seconds can be enough to change your perspective and make you think about doing something else. Make you go to your reactive stress management list and say, oh, you know what? Instead of eating, I think I'm actually going to just go meditate for 5 minutes. Or I'm going to go walk the dog. Or I'm going to put on some music and dance around the house, because that sounds like something that's going to make me feel good, not something that's just going to be a Band-Aid for my stress.